All right, so in case anyone has, kind of followed my videos for quite some time, you probably would know, right, that if you want a Gryphon trap, you obviously get Gryphon, right? But what do you do when you don't? So I was thinking, the mindset of a Gryphon trap, right, is that you basically fill your account, right, full of resources, probably in excess of like 25 to 50 mil. You empty your base by sending out troops on tiles, right? And then essentially you sit back on like an island or something, and you just wait until somebody scouts you and goes, "Oh, hey, he's got a lot of resources, no troops, perfect." Because again, you don't have an anti scout, and this is something that again in rally traps and in solo traps you'll find out that works 99% of the time because people are just goddamn gullible. They look hundreds of millions of resources laying out for me to steal. Ho ho ho! I gotta go and get that, without any thought or reason, right? Because to get something that's too good to be true, it really could be too good to be true. Having that said, right? So essentially, then what they would do is they wait a couple seconds for these solos to come in, and then they go up here, they pop their skill stone, and they pop that Gryphon ability. In 6 seconds, their troops are back, and they random out. Right? That's the Gryphon trap in a nutshell. Okay, it's a really simple, bare bones to the point. But how could you do that, right? In the same way, but maybe a little faster. Now, this is kind of what I was thinking, and this is how I would do it. So what you can do, right, to kind of mimic that is you basically do it with darkness. Now, I would say that the reason why I say this, okay, is that what you can do, all right, is you got to go through, you got to get yourself first a 50% army boost, all right, because the main thing here is that you're going to have to basically max your army size. The next bit that makes this work, okay, is that at bare minimum, right, you get 375k max, right, in an army. But one thing that is interesting in the military command branch is that if you go down a little ways, you'll notice that there's something called Darkness Invasion. Darkness Invasion adds another 50,000 to the army size, which means that you're now doing 375,000 troops plus 50k. Okay, so why that comes in handy now is so like if I'm trying to eat a march, right, that's 375,000 to 4, for example, right? And so I'm, if I'm trying to be practical here, right, 375,000 plus 50k, okay, that's 425,000 troops. That's quite a bit, right? But now for most people, okay, most people probably don't carry tier 4 on them if they're trying to do this. Okay, but if you are, it's obviously going to be easier because 425k is a pretty easy counter to a 375k march, especially if, said person is sending infantry and you're in cavalry. Well, that's an easy one, right? But the thing is, right, so when you do that, you're basically going to have approximately 0 seconds between the time it's going to take you to get that full 425k, right, to basically pull out. So there's 425k. Once you cancel, it's done, right? Now, in the next second, what I would do then, right, is you then got to go and you've got to put the next chunkage in here. Now, I've got 295, okay, because I've had the time to take in the research to do the shelter capacities. And in case you're wondering, where can you improve it? You go inside a military command once again, and you correct yourself by getting shelter capacity, which adds 50k. And then the other place you go to is you then go in here and you go down and you look for the harpy, and you get another 40k, potentially maybe even 50k through her. All right, so that should give you roughly 320-ish, I think, when you actually said and done. So now you've gone from 425, right, to 456, and in this case, if I have two, now you're talking 700k, right? Just with those two armies, right? That's already almost close to 1 million troops. That means, if you're trying to do the bare minimum to counter a rally or counter a solo for that matter, what do you need? Well, I would say that if you're not a tier 4 player, okay, and you want to actually do the math on this, all right, the thing that you have to understand is that 375,000 tier 4 is roughly 3.5 million strength, which is like the equivalent of like, I don't know, it's like a mil or so tier 2 if I'm not wrong. But if I can give you an exact number, I will, because again, everybody's going to want to know what that amount is. So let me see here. Okay, so assuming that you had 375k, that's 3.4 million, which in essence is like If I did 300,000 of that in tier 3, and then 500,000 or 600,000 or so in tier 2, that's almost roughly about the amount that you would need in order to counter a tier 4 march. But that's just like bare minimum, okay? Just to eat it, okay? Just to be able to solo counter it. And I think it's probably best, right, that, if you're taking multiple hits, you're going to want quite a bit of troops to be able to do that. And that's why I think a lot of the time, if you're going to be a Gryphon trap, I think it would help a lot if you're a tier 4 player and you've got tier 4. Because obviously having 375k and then the remainder all tier 3 and tier 2, that just makes it so much easier. All right. Because at that point, you've already got the strength and 375k, and you can just put 375k 3 times in a row. That's 900,000. And like I was saying earlier, in just 2 armies, you're already at 700k. So, all right, but at that point, right, going off of what I've just told you, right, so you're going to need 300k and then 500k tier 2, right? So you're at 800k. So how do you get that extra 2 to 300k you're going to need, right? Now that part, I feel like you can either do it in one of 2 ways, right? And again, we're thinking 6 seconds tops. That's 1 click to go cut the darkness stuff. It's another second to go cut off the shelter, right? So you've spent about 2 seconds. You haven't swapped gear. You haven't done anything like that yet. Okay. So in that amount of time, I'm thinking, okay, so what could you do then, right? Well, the only logical, I think, solution to that then, right, is that you then have to start to consider, all right, well, if I've got, only a few seconds tops. And again, I think a lot of the reasons why Gryphon traps work the way they do is that a lot of the time they put themselves on islands. And that works really, really well to their advantage because that gives them time. Okay. But I feel like if you're somebody that doesn't have time, you're within seconds of each other, right? And you want to make this optimum and work as well as possible, then your best bet is probably to stick with pretty much what I would do is, okay, so like if, again, going back to the fact that, Noah Darkness is handy and all, right, for being able to stash a ton of troops, but I think if, let's suppose maybe your friendly was right beside you, there's roughly, right, if you put on speed gear, right, so like let's suppose when you're sitting, you're actually sitting in, a set of ivory chokers, right, and then you wear some, the particular pieces are like the Predator Pauldrons and then the Untamed Boots. There's only going to be probably 2 to 3 seconds left between that. And like I was saying earlier, it's 300k just to reinforce somebody. Okay, because you have 250 usually minimum, and then you got that extra 50k. But with the army boost, you should, in theory, be able to put enough in there, right, that once you reinforce somebody, you're going to get just that much more. And so in theory, what you could do is if you have like some alternate accounts, you could, in theory, right, you could have those accounts. And again, this is where we get into the, okay, well, do you use mobile or do you use PC? If you were a PC player, what you'd do is you'd set up 3 emulators. 2 accounts would just sit there and dormant. What I would do is cancel their rallies almost simultaneously. And that way they're both 2 seconds apart. They come in, and then you're essentially, you've added another 600k, right? And again, that's assuming now, you're putting 3 to 4 armies, all right? But that, again, this is kind of what I'm trying to suggest to you. If you're trying to replicate what a Gryphon trap does, that's essentially what you would have to do. Now, again, there's obviously the question then of, well, what if I reinforced myself? And that's another option too that I think, although some people haven't done it yet, I think it also arguably might work just as well. To have somebody that's sitting out with like no troops or anything like that, and then be reinforced, within split seconds, and that might work just as well. You might be able to manage that, and I think that will work just as well, just like a Gryphon trap. And frankly, you could do it just by having your accounts shielded on the island, waiting in time, and just, have your buddies reinforce you at the split second needed. And that would work wonderfully, because then all you really have to do is pull your shelter, cancel your rally, and then your buddies reinforce you, swap gear, and you're, boom, random, and you're done. that would do essentially the same thing as a Gryphon trap. Now, I hopefully, that this idea is somewhat useful for you guys. I'd love to see that particular trap method used, and of course, I will try it out myself if I get a chance. But hopefully, that idea is somewhat useful. And well, needless to say, I'll see you guys next time.